star.
Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Thank you very much for joining me. As you would have seen from the screen, our guest this evening is Dr. David Hinds, political activist and columnist, academic, writer, and many other titles. David, welcome again to Plain Talk.
Thank you, Chris.
It's late in your break to be appearing on Plain Talk. You normally are here sometime around early June.
Yeah. Well, a lot has been happening, so you know, the delay means that we probably have a lot more to talk about.
Well, let's start. Last month marked the death anniversary of Walter Rodney. It passed pretty quietly in Guyana. Are we forgetting Walter Rodney?
Yes and no. The yes has to do with the larger political culture, which has become a kind of instant culture, a culture that is not grounded in history. And persons like Walter Rodney and Forbes Burnham and Chelly Jagan and so forth, they've become names that people recognize as leaders, but people don't see them as institutions. And so that's something that as a society we've got to deal with. The no is that it is very difficult to forget Walter Rodney in his entirety, largely because he was such a phenomenal international scholar and activist that young scholars, young activists would still make reference to him. And like I said, his contribution to our politics means that whenever we are in situations like we are in now, we are faced with challenges, and sometimes we don't think that there are solutions. Walter Rodney lives in the sense that he, through his activism mainly, but also his academic work, confronted a lot of the problems that we're still dealing with, and he has left us, in a sense, a blueprint of how to tackle some of these problems.
Well, why haven't those who inherited the mantle, and you can say the wider society did, but more directly the party with which he was associated in his lifetime, why haven't they been more pronounced and active in promoting the Walter Rodney principles, the Rodneyite doctrine, as we so often hear? Is it that within the new political architecture in which they themselves operate, there is not a great room for Walter Rodney?
That is partly true. Once you get into partisan politics, and once the WPA decided to get into partisan politics in a way that Walter Rodney did not participate in partisan politics during its time. Once the WPA got into electoral politics, not partisan politics, electoral politics, and then at least in name, if not in practice, they're part of a government. It opens a new framework and a new challenge for the party. And as a member of the party, I have to tell you that we have still not worked out how to balance the traditional WPA praxis, the Rodneyites praxis, with this new intervention into electoral politics and now being part of something called the government.
Sorry, go on. No,
I'm done.
Is it that difficult because the WPA is known to be the party of the intellectualism, the great thinkers? Why after 4 years it has not been able to work out its role?
Part of it has to do with the larger society, right? You have to work out your role within the context of the society you're operating in. And our society, our politics are so different, so difficult, that these things have proven to be much more difficult to work out in the short term. I think in the long term, they will work it out. Here, let me go in the wider context, Chris. The left, the radical left of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s in the wider Caribbean, in as political parties, as institutions, have disappeared. The WPA is the only radical left party in the English-speaking Caribbean that is still in place.
You're using it more as a label there than a practice.
No practice. I'm talking about.
Would you say the WPA is radical left?
No.
As of now?
That's why I said the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the radical parties of that era are now gone. Part of it is that radical politics is no longer in the ascendancy in the region. And so you can be a radical party in a society that is not radical, that doesn't have space for radical parties, as it did in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. And so when I say it has been difficult to work out, it's in that context that I mean. How do you maintain your radical praxis in a society that is not open to that kind of radicalism? And I think it has taken long precisely because of that.
Now, I know you've said this on this program before, that the coalition has not functioned as well as it should. There's not enough consultation with the smaller parties. In fact, sometimes you get the impression that there are only two parties.
Yes.
But has the WPA really tried it, or has it tried and failed to not to impose, but to sell the Rodneyite principle and their relevance to current day situation, not only in the political sense, but I'm talking about economic sense, social sense, a village sense, etc.
It has tried with little success. I wouldn't say fail. And part of it has to do, again, here is a political party that had widespread support up to 30, maybe 20 years ago. And this party has not grown in the sense that younger people have not come into the party. And so therefore what you have are the same old leaders from the 1970s and the 1980s who are still at the helm of the party, and that has shrunk. So what the party suffers from is the fact that it is not seen as a mass party. And so younger people are not coming to the party, because these days young people go into parties to get into to get minister work and to get into parliament and so forth. And when they look at a party like WPA, they don't see that. In fact, they see a party that is not considered to be a winner. And so the party has suffered from that shift in our mass politics. It does not have the kind of energy that is needed to do a lot of those things in a sustained way.
David, is it cause or effect? Has the party really tried it? One is not sure who is the spokesperson. I don't think when you write your column, you're not speaking with the WPA. Where does the WPA stand on several of the issues we face with? Village life, for example. Our villages, where does it stand on the question of the sugar workers? Where does it stand on the business of oil and gas? I know it did speak on the issue that Clive Thomas had raised in Buxton, the money for households. But we know the WPA doesn't seem to be providing the leadership and the intellect for which it was once so famous.
Well, it does at a certain level. It may not be doing it at the same level as it did 30, 40 years ago. And that is what I'm trying to hammer on, making the link between the WPA of old and saying that there is a new politics, it's a new era. The world has moved on. And I am saying, as a form of criticism, is that the WPA, and I would say other left formations across our regions, have not quite worked out how to catch up with with the modern day.
Many of them don't even survive anymore.
Right.
When you talk about Bobby Clark and Barbara.
Yeah. And so it's right. It's
Jamaica, wherever.
Right, and extremely difficult. What we do, what the left has done, is that we function in individual capacity. Somebody like myself, into commentary, into trying to shape ideas at the mass level, and so on. That is a challenge because you've got to deal with really a decadent political culture and so forth. Some of our old members are in doing women's work. Some are doing environmental work and so forth. You see, these formations like the WPA are really not the kind of formations for the kind of electoral, kind of divisive politics that we have. And I think that's the challenge for us.
Well, I get back to Walter Rodney.
Yeah.
He was considered a Marxist. I think he's self-described Marxist.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
Does the party embraces him and still does?
Yes.
But does the party and do its leaders embrace Marxism?
Well, Rodney was a Marxist among other things. Rodney was also a Pan-Africanist.
Yes.
All right? Rodney was also a black nationalist. But here's the point. Rodney and his generation recognized when to be Marxist and when to be Pan-Africanist and when to be other things. When Rodney was in Jamaica, he was a Pan-Africanist. More than a Marxist. Yeah. I'm not saying he wasn't a Marxist, but it is Pan-Africanism in a society that's 90-something% African. When he went to Tanzania, where the society is a thing, he kind of combined the Marxism with Pan-Africanism. He came to Guyana, where we had our ethnic problems, and he didn't put his Pan-Africanism to the fore. His Marxism, his class praxis came to the fore. But I preface the answer to your question by saying that to say that those who are Marxists, most of them remain Marxists. But Marxism as a praxis is not the kind of ideological framework that pushes conversation in this society. This society has now become, and the Caribbean, they've now become societies that are they're into slogans, but it's true. So the AFC came on the scene and said we will not join with one of the two, and people had actually believed that, right? The AFC didn't come out with any ideological grounding, but people rallied to that slogan. 5 years, 10 years later, they realize it's just a slogan, right?
No, but remember we are talking about the relevance of Walter Rodney. That was the question we started with, and wherever he was a Marxist. And he did embrace Marxism. Does his party what existed?
Let me go back in history for a little. In 1986, in 1986, the Catholic Standard asked the WPA, do you believe in the dictatorship of the proletariat? And the WPA answered, this is as the Cold War is coming to an end, the WPA answered, we believe in the dictatorship of nothing. The WPA described itself as independent Marxists when it came into being in the 1970s. By the 1980s, we are describing ourselves as Rodney, right? Here's the point I'm making. Things like, are you a Marxist and so on, I don't think are relevant, but I do think...
But don't you think those are strong ideologies, strong belief systems?
Yes, but you have to apply them to the current circumstances.
But are we applying them at all?
Yes, I do think.
In what sense? Okay.
I think the WPA has firmly remain committed to the emancipation of the working class. I mean, our big policy initiative for oil and gas, is about the working class. The trash stands for arises out of our commitment to the working class. So we're not saying we're Marxists. What I'm saying is that we're committed to the working class. We're committed to the ethnic equality and ethnic unity of the country still. Those are things that don't change.
I don't want to forget important persons. We talked about, you said some of them have gone into women's activities.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Of course, from that you mentioned that the name Andaiye.
Yeah.
comes to mind.
Right.
We've lost Andaiye.
Yeah.
What's the significance of the death of Andaiye?
The significance of the death of Andaiye is I think we've lost one of the most pragmatic voices. And I say that because this current era calls for pragmatism, right? And Andaiye was a feminist, but a feminist whose feminism was grounded in race and class. Racial equality, class equality. So she didn't believe in women liberation just for middle class women. But her women's liberation was that women's liberation would mean nothing if poor women did not get an equal share in the society. All right? So Andaiye, I think, is one of our few leaders who was able to bring together class, race, gender and nationality. Even Walter Rodney, I mean, gender was not part of his practice. So Andaiye's significance for me is our untiring capacity to keep adapting to the circumstances. Of course, AUC Quina falls in to that category, but it's not easy in these environments, right, to keep up with what's going on. So I think somebody like Andaiye was ahead of the party, because I think the party, because it has become caught up in this electoral thing, is not able to bring together all those strands in a way that Andaiye did in her work and her thought.
You talk about the working class. Some iconic things, and I don't use the word positively necessarily, have happened that probably would be the antithesis of the working class. The government, when it came into power, 50% salary increase for itself. The sugar workers, about 7 and more thousand of them on the breadline. That's not working class.
No, right, and I don't defend the government on that, and I don't think the WPA defends the government on that. We were opposed to the 50% increase. While we support the idea of doing something radical about sugar in terms of reducing the subsidy, the big subsidy that the government historically has been doing in relation to sugar. We know that we are paying more to produce sugar than it's paid in the rest of the world. And so in principle we support reforming the sugar industry. Of course we were disappointed with the execution of that reform, which has led to hardship for some sugar workers.
Well, I don't know for some. David, you and I went out there ourselves. And I have just come back from Belize, and I can tell you, the impact is significant.
But some sugar workers are still working because we still have some estates open.
But even those are now on the threat because of an apparent lethargy.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the execution of the policy was not done properly, and I think the government has to take responsibility for that. And I want to say that the WPA does not agree with the way in which they are executing the reform of the sugar industry.
But the WPA itself hasn't said that. You're saying it.
Huh?
The WPA itself hasn't come out and said that.
Yes.
Issued a statement, has it?
Yes, the WPA said that very clearly.
And so what would the WPA? Okay, it has criticized. So what would be its suggestion for a solution?
In terms of
sugar.
Well, I mean, you will have to ask the WPA that what is its solution, right?
So you're saying they made a statement of criticizing without...
No, they made a statement saying Gaisuku put forward a clear plan how to move forward. Dr. Thomas was at that time the chairman of Gaisuku, and it was then left to the government to execute the plan.
And that plan was not to close their states.
Huh?
That plan was not to close their states.
If the what?
The plan was not
to close estates, right?
It was not.
Right.
So the government acted in
defiance. Yes, right. That's what I'm saying. The government dropped the ball in terms of how to deal with sugar.
How has it fared? How has this government fared? Because you said you talked about the working class. How has the government fared in other measures of working class advancement and promotion?
Well, I mean, it has done very little in terms of a living wage for workers, not just sugar workers, but public service workers, most of whom are traditional supporters of the leading party in the coalition. And so you can say they're equal opportunity when it comes.
Not very positive, yes.
We're not very positive when it comes to the way. Look, I think this government has turned out to be like all the other governments that we've had in our post-colonial experience. That is, government that has not been transformational. All right? In terms of saying, here is what we have inherited, and here is what we have to radically do to shift the paradigm that we have inherited. The early Burnham government attempted to do that, but lost its way in terms of the political framework and went down an authoritarian road. And so you can't have economic and social transformation with authoritarianism, and so it's lost its way. But ever since then, I don't think any other government has really taken very seriously the need to transform the political economy, transform the society, to deal with things like poverty, chronic poverty that we inherited, to deal with things like moving the economy from a kind of merchant buying and selling economy into a productive manufacturing economy. Those are things that I think that this government had the opportunity to do, but it didn't do. And so in that sense, the government has become like any other government. But here's the thing, Chris. Here is what separates this government from previous governments. On one count, it has not been overtly and overly authoritarian. It is not openly crushed civil liberties. People, opposition opponents have not been beaten in the streets by the police. They have not been locked up. We have not had any political assassinations. I think those things are important because all the other governments have been guilty of that. And this government has put a break on that. And I think we have to applaud.
You mentioned authoritarianism. Not a lot of people agree.
I said overly. I said overly.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Right?
You speak like a lawyer there.
and so yes, and I think we have to give them some credit,
Absolutely.
for that. The second thing is that despite perceptions on part of maybe most of the supporters of the PPP, and this I think comes out of the sugar situation and so forth. I think this government has been, in terms of our post-colonial governments, the most ethnically fair. Am I saying that this government should not be and cannot be charged with ethnic favoritism? That's not what I'm saying. All right? I'm saying when I compare it with previous governments, it has been ethnically fair. I think a lot of resources have been expended in Amerindian communities. I think despite the mistakes with sugar, I don't think there's been an overtly hostile this government has been overtly hostile to sugar workers.
But it doesn't have to be hostile, it's just neglectful. It would be bad enough.
Yeah, well, no, I'm comparing it with previous governments, right? The Portuguese businessmen have not, a business community have not been targeted for any kind of discriminatory actions on the part of government. So I think the government, by and large, compared with previous government, has been more ethnically fair than others. And I think this augurs well,
but
because we can build on it.
David,
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't know that you can produce empirical evidence of that. I mean, you look, the permanent secretaries, major governmental institutions and so on. It has had a transformation in terms of ethnic composition of the workforce. You look across the entire public sector. Now, I agree with you on certain scores. I think yes, we have not had the kinds of killings that have taken place in the past. But sometimes, benign neglect in economic and social things could be as damaging as other forms of violence.
And I do agree. And the benign neglect is not just to East Indians.
Yes.
It's also to Africans, and that's what I'm saying. In terms, it has not favored one ethnic group. Now, empirically, you're right. When you look at the public service, it's the flip side of what it used to be under the PPP. But I think when you look below the public service, and it's one of the difficulties this government has had. I and myself have come out and talk about flushing out PPP moles. I think at the second level below the permanent secretaries, I think they have not interfered with the ethnic composition of that.
We don't know that
Well,
there is no information available, and
yeah.
take GCOM.
Uh-huh.
An attempt was made to examine the employment practices in GCOM, and if you look at the higher level, you see what I'm talking about. And they just refused to cooperate with the Ethnic Relations Commission. That doesn't send a good signal to the rest of society. Look, we're prepared to discuss ethnicity, human resource issues, employment practices in an open and transparent manner.
No, and I take that, but what I'm saying is that there's not been any wholesale cleansing of East Indians from the public service below the level of permanent secretaries. And I think, so while you're saying that there's no evidence to show that,
I don't think you're right.
Well, show me,
No.
show me the evidence of the purging.
I didn't say purging.
Right.
I didn't say purging. That's your word.
Right.
But I'm saying there was much more than just at the permanent secretary level. It would be wrong to believe it has only affected 8 people.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but you keep saying permanent secretary.
I am sure you can't live in an ethnic society like this and you don't have ethnic discrimination going on. I'm saying at the level at which we have come to expect it and that we've become accustomed to, that we saw, for example, under the PPP government. All right, the way in which African Guyanese were, in a sense, weeded out of leadership and decision making.
But
I don't think we see it at the same level under this government.
Isn't it true? That are the same kind of parallel? And this is the evil, I think, about both of these governments. Yes, it might appear at a certain level that there is fairness. But if you looked at it, the PPP, you had a lot of African Guyanese in the public service as well. That was never a problem. And so to say that here it's different, I don't agree with you.
No, Chris. If you examine,
there wasn't wholesale.
No.
Are you suggesting there was wholesale, and I'm going to use your word now, cleansing of Afro-Guyanese in the public sector under the PPP?
No. What the PPP did was to use contract workers as a way of nullifying African Guyanese leadership in the public service. Very skillful, right? And this government has not done it I'm sure it has happened in instances. I'm not. But I'm saying it has not happened at the same level as under the previous government.
No, I don't want to get, because one can get into a rabbit hole. But if you were to look at the contract workers of this government in terms of ethnicity, I would say it's just as good or just as bad.
No, I beg to differ. I mean, I've looked at some of the data, Chris, and I beg to differ. I am not saying that this government is not guilty in instances, but I'm saying compared to previous governments.
You look at all the top positions that it has made, David. Look at them. You have two things here. You have reality and you have perception.
Yes.
And it's very important.
Yes.
That you address this perception issue.
And I know there's perception, and I expect if you're Indian Guyanese to perceive it in that way. This is the nature of the ethnic society, and I think that is why governments in a country like Guyana have to have that concern at the center of policy making. I'm a big supporter of ethnic impact statements, especially when it comes to big issues. How do these big policies affect the various ethnic groups? And I think that this government has not practiced that. And going forward, we need to have that as a priority for all governments.
Well, let me ask you about this. Let's switch to your favorite party, the AFC. They seem to have had an intestine war about this prime ministerialship. What's your from a political scientist perspective? What's your view of this battle between Nagamutu and Ramjatan, and Nagamutu trying to play the PNC card, now PNCR card, and what's your position?
Well, the AFC, unfortunately, and I say this very carefully, the AFC has become a party of power and power distribution. You see, it has not been a party that has been in the trenches like other parties, all right, and work their way into government. The AFC really was almost born into government, and they got into government, and the party, I think, has not had the history of political struggle and political activism, and so therefore it becomes all about power. All right. So when they make decisions, the decisions are being made largely in relationship or in the context of power, and not really in the context of principle. And I think that is part of what we're seeing here, where some members of the party think Nagamutu should be the prime ministerial candidate, the other think that it should be Ramjatan and so forth. And so you don't have the party arguing about policies. You don't have the party arguing about democracy and all those kinds of big things. The party is arguing about the spoils of office. Unfortunately, that is what the party that has been plunged into office without any kind of political upbringing finds itself in. Unfortunately, I think they're good people in the AFC, but as a political formation, it hasn't had any kind of political upbringing, and so all it's about is about the spoils of office. Unfortunately,
well, that's a little bit of a paradox. You're saying they're good people, but they're all about but somehow
as a party, yes.
Somehow collective,
yes.
But the collective is made up of the individuals.
Yes. But a lot of times individuals allow their individual principle to suffer on the altar.
You call it principle.
Individual principle to suffer on the altar of political expediency.
I wonder if
the party works in mysterious ways.
If it's not personal expediency.
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't be unkind to people, because I assume.
But this is not being unkind.
No, but I assume first and foremost that individuals, human beings as individuals, are inherently good, and that when they get themselves in context, that's when they begin to shift from being good to other things.
But if you're the scientist, I'm not. But if these are the leaders, these are the people who are shaping things, how come things have deformed them? Because the Ramjatans and the Nagamutus of the AFC are now deformed human beings.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
I know you wouldn't. I know you wouldn't
go. But we look at our history in the Caribbean, right? During the decolonization era, there were people who were marching with the workers. As soon as the British left and they took power, they turned their guns on the workers. And that's the kind of thing that we have to deal with as a society, because I think it's much deeper. It's much deeper than we think. It has to do a lot with the way in which we've been socialized over centuries on that plantation and so forth. It has had some effect.
I'm sometimes wonder whether we don't blame our past too much.
No, but the present is all of the past, Chris.
No, but
the present is a culmination of the past.
We are the architects and the drivers of our destiny as well.
And we are driving ourselves in the wrong direction.
Well, and I've said this on this program before about this thing about power. Power doesn't corrupt people, but power reveals what these men might always have been. And tragically, it's mostly men.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with us.
That formulation I am not in entire agreement with. I have known some people. You know, who I know very closely, and I know that they're still quote unquote decent people. And when I look at the way they operate when they're in power, I see that paradox, you know.
But
And I can only, as a social scientist, look at it within the context of the nature of the society and how it has developed over time.
you know the parallel between the AFC of Guyana and the Liberal Party of the UK, that being in a coalition in which you're playing a second fiddle, you are bound to lose in the long run.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yes. I'm very, very clear about that. I'm for coalition politics and partnership politics. But I think that genuine coalitions and partnerships should come not from the notion of who's big and who's small, but from the notion of your strengths, how you merge your strengths. Because a big party would have weaknesses. Bigness don't mean that you have a monopoly on ideas and so forth. You're a big party because you've been around long and you're part of the ethnic architecture and so on and so forth. But you have weaknesses, and so I think what the attractiveness of coalition for me is about how parties and forces bring together their strengths to move the country forward in a positive way. Unfortunately, I don't think our coalition politics, not only here in Guyana but also the rest of the Caribbean, is really premised on that principle.
Well, I don't. Nobody has can see into the future, but when you look at one of the consequences of the Commingsburg Accord, whether Granger wants to or not, he's bound by that.
Yeah.
He has to tolerate the inefficiencies or whatever it is.
Yeah.
How harmful has that been in constraining this administration in pursuing its policies and its objectives?
Yes, it has been harmful in some regards. All right, because if you don't work out how to manage a coalition, you end up with what is happening there that you describe. But I think, on the other hand, some of the positives, the thing like the restraint on government overreaching and assassinations, I think part of that
Do you see that as a function
of the coalition? Because I think had it been a one-party government, they would have gone in that direction. I think so. There are pros and cons. I believe that over time you've got to build these things, and therefore that's why I'm arguing, and that's why I support my party, the WPA, remain in the coalition, because I think that we've made a bad start in terms of how to manage coalitions, and but I think that's something that we can improve on, and it's on that premise that I have supported the party remaining coalition, because I think a coalition government in principle is an advance on one party government.
Let's talk about the oil sector. What's your view on how well we are managing
Not
this
well.
sector?
Not well. We've bungled the stuff from the signing of the contract to the hiding of the
Signing bonus?
the signing bonus, to the continued missteps that we are making in terms of a coherent policy. What is your local content, to what extent you are balancing in the national interest, the interest of your citizens and your workers against the interests of the big companies. Is there fairness in the distribution of the blocks and so forth? I don't think that we can pat ourselves on the shoulder and say we've done a sterling job. And I think a lot of it has to do with this whole thing of government knows it all. Because I happen to believe that the people who have the best expertise in this regard are either in the periphery of the government or outside of the government. And the way we do politics in this space, if we don't say, here is the oil industry, this is a national thing, and so therefore the party should pull itself back, the government should pull itself back and allow the experts to really dictate the policy, and the government gives political direction. It seems to me the government is giving both political direction and kind of dictating policy, and I don't think it's doing a good job in both, in either of the two areas.
In terms of the government, the Minister of Petroleum is the President. Is President
Yeah.
So that's a criticism of Granger.
Well, but I think he's Minister of Petroleum in name only. I think a lot of it is being driven by this department of
but he's the one who created it. You can't create something and then say, oh, that is somebody else's business.
No.
You can never delegate responsibility.
Yeah, but I'm saying that he's not an oil export. He's giving political direction.
No, but shouldn't he sit back? David, we're talking any kind of business.
Yeah.
Something is going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It is obviously wrong.
Yeah.
You've had, I don't know, any single day of any year where a positive has come out of the oil sector that favors us. Today you see in the newspapers, Hess, from Hess Corporation, saying, oh, Guyana is good for our shareholders.
Yeah.
Now, and we put it on our bloody front page.
Yeah.
You every time we get another oil discovery, it's Exxon announces it.
Yeah.
Isn't it time that David Granger, as the minister responsible for the petroleum sector, say, you know what? This thing isn't going well. And it's time that I show that leadership and pull it back.
Political parties and governments that they throw up in this part of the world don't act like that. At the end of the day, their decisions are premised not on that logic that you pointed out there. Their decisions are premised on what is good for the party. And when the party is in government, what is good for the government? Look, we talked about Rodney earlier. You know, these are the things that Rodney identified as chronic problems in our management of the political economy and the society. And that's what you're talking about. I don't think it's just simply about Granger. Granger is the lead, and so you're right. But this is about how do you balance party, race, government, and the larger imperatives of the political economy. How do you balance them?
Are you suggesting that a good, strong, vibrant, pro-Guyana oil sector is somehow in opposition to the interests of the party?
No, I am not saying in opposition. I'm saying it ought not to be in opposition. If you have a vision for the society, you bring those things together in the larger vision. But I'm saying that because there is no larger vision about where you are taking the society, oil will suffer, sugar will suffer. It's not just oil, but it's also agriculture will suffer, manufacturing will suffer, because
they're all already suffering.
Right, because there's no larger vision here. And I think it is easy, and in some ways we're correct, because they're the government, he's the leader. But I think that's not where the problem is. I think the problem is at the level of our politics and our political culture, and we have to break some things.
But
we have to put.
But you can't
But
separate
Chris,
that from the persons.
No, but Chris, and I'm not getting into persons.
No, you can't say politics, but you're not talking about politicians.
Yeah, but I'm talking about politicians in general. I'm not getting into individuals here.
No, I'm not getting into. I'm talking generally as well.
Yeah, but hear what I'm saying, Chris. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have some obvious problems. We have problems of ethnicity married to party and married to power. Unless we settle that, all the other things will suffer. You know, and it's I follow the debates on the oil thing closely. I learn a lot from it. Because it's not something that I paid attention to before. And so I learn a lot from it. Where I disagree with the advocates of what we should do and what we shouldn't do is that they seem to be carrying on that conversation outside of a place called Guyana. There's a place called Guyana. There's a reality called Guyana. And we are going to fix those things if we situated them within the context of our larger...
So are you suggesting, and I know you're going to say no.
Yeah.
Let us ignore what is happening here. And David, I'll give you one simple example, but let me make my one. Let's just ignore how we are bungling our petroleum sector whilst we try to fix what is becoming increasingly apparent and unfixable political situation.
Right.
Let me give an example.
Uh-huh.
There is an entity, a company, Mid-Atlantic company. It was given a contract sometime in March 2015, literally weeks before the 2015 elections, given by Donald Ramatar and I think it was Robert Persaud. Now, 4 years have passed, and under this is the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act. After what happens with oil in the petroleum sector, when you get a petroleum agreement, you get a petroleum exploration license. After 4 years, you are required under the law to give up half of that holdings that you've taken. You know, we have pointed out, people say, oh, the critics and the analysts. I admit I'm a critic and an analyst. I think I can read a petroleum agreement. I can read. We have pointed out that, look, here is your opportunity to recover part of those blocks that were given improperly, whether, you know, the massive number of blocks given first by Janet Jagan and then by Raphael Trotman. Now you had Robert Persaud. Those ought to be elementary things.
Yeah.
That should not be, oh, we have to fix the political culture first.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying you have to fix the political culture.
Oh, yeah.
First. No, what I'm saying is that you are recognizing some obvious problems, as you say, they're elementary things. And so one has to ask the question, why are these elementary things not being done? And all I'm saying that what is creating the conditions for ignoring and not carrying out those elementary things has to do with the larger politics.
Well,
so I'm saying that we're going to solve those problems not by themselves. We have never done them. We have not solved sugar by itself. We have not solved the problems in the rice industry. We have not solved the problems of wages for sugar workers by themselves. All of that, a lot of it is tied to the whole question that we have not solved the question of management of power. I think if we get our management of power right, we will get a lot of those things.
Great abstraction, and I agree. But listen, if you see You've appointed someone.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with it. You have set up a machinery called Department of Energy.
Yeah.
You have identified the problems.
Yeah.
You hope that they fix these problems.
Yeah.
But yet, daily, you see the problems are in fact getting worse.
So let me turn and be the interviewer now. Why do you think that happens?
I can't speculate
Right.
why David Granger would tolerate that.
Right.
I can't.
Right, and that's why I'm saying David Granger is heading a government in a place called Guyana. There's a political environment called Guyana. I go back. You started with the WPA and so forth, and I go back to Clive Thomas, who's still with us, who made this point since the 1970s. That you cannot trade bread for justice. He also made the point, which the WPA adopted, that the economy is not going to move forward. We are not going to have real development in Guyana outside of a political solution. And it is that paradigm that I'm using in answering your question, that those things, they are elementary things. And you can't be saying that our people who are managing these things are dumb people. They don't understand elementary things. No, I know you're not saying that. And they don't understand elementary things. So it must be something else. And I think that something else lies in the political logjam.
Is it political? Is it our tolerance of low standards?
Well, part of that. No, and you're right. You're quite correct. Right? What has happened is that we've come to tolerate low standards from our government. When the PPP were in office, Indian Guyanese and supporters of the party did not hold them to a high standard. These come into power now, and their supporters are not hold them to a high standard. They whisper to people like me, all right? But they themselves would not put pressure on their leaders. And when 2 and 3 and 4 of us come up front and say, no, but you're wrong, you ought to do this and so on, we are clicked wrong and so on and so forth. But you're right. Part of it has to do that we are partisan. We pick and choose how we pressure government. If our party is in government, we don't pressure government. If the PPP were in office and doing these things, African Guyanese will be screaming all over the place. If the PPP comes back to office, Indian Guyanese now were screaming about all these elementary things will shut up. And unfortunately, that is the country we live in.
Look, let me give you another example.
And I don't mean you, the individual, but I mean generally people who are partisan.
I don't even worry about it.
Right. Because you've been consistent.
Right. In any case,
right.
I'm not. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
Now, one of the big problems, and you touch on it, David, this question of bonus, signing bonus. Here, you've got a set of party supporters again, going and wanting to get the same kind of blocks without bonus. Isn't that perpetuating? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, Chris. I'm saying that I am never going to agree that you are going to deal with Hess or Exxon or any of these big companies, and you're a minister as a monopoly undecided. I'm working with all my troops. I'm working with all my people across the political aisle, all the experts. I'm working with them to sit at that table because I'm dealing with people who are experts at this thing. And that is what is bedeviling us. We do not have national positions. We have party positions. And that is hurting us. So elementary things that we are supposed to do, we don't do it because we are calculating it within the context of how it will make the party look good or bad.
Where do we go from here?
I think where do we go from is that we continue to press on. This society is not an easy society. I think we have to have aspirations, and here is where I completely agree with you and others. We have to aspire. But if we aspire, we have to be cognizant of what we are dealing with. And I think we have to continue to press on. I have said that I support the re-election of this government because I think that when I look at the two choices, and I really hope the day will come when we don't have to make two choices. Perhaps when a day will come when we don't have to make choices, that we have a truly national government with no winners and no losers. And so, insofar as I have to choose between the two, I am saying that I am supporting the re-election of this government, not because it has done a wonderful job, not because I think that they have not made serious mistakes, but because the things that I feel strongly about, such as poverty alleviation, such as ethnic security and ethnic equality, such as gender equality, such as village renewal, such as workers having a living wage, and so forth. I feel that under this current government, those things have a better chance of moving forward than the other government.
To what extent would you say any one of those? I know your list was, your laundry list was
Yeah.
particularly long.
Yeah, but they're interrelated.
To what extent you think the cause has been advanced in the 4 years? And I would say, whilst you say that,
Yeah.
the government itself did not identify many of those very things as part of its objectives.
Yeah. Well, it's government, I mean, it's one part that's why me and you not in government, right? Because if we're in government, we have to compromise.
We won't survive.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be kicked out because you don't be in that thing called government and advance principles and ideas that it doesn't. But here, no, I don't think those things have been advanced in the 4 years. I'd be insulting people's intelligence, and I'd be dishonest if I said that those things have advanced. But what I do think has happened over the last 4 years is that the conditions for advancing those things have been normalized and stabilized. And I point to some of the big things. Such as the removal of this fear that you're going to lose your job if you speak against the government and all those things. I think there's been a break on that. There's been a break on the criminalization of the state. There has been, I think, corruption has slowed. And I'm being very careful what I said.
It's coming back in a... Initially, it did.
Slowed, right. And so, while I agree with you, yes, there's been no advance. But certainly, there's been a stabilization of the environment that I think augurs well for the near future going forward.
We haven't spoken, and I know you've written about, I thought I saw your most recent column is what is
a caretaker government.
A caretaker government. And I think it is important that we say, and I don't know when you're leaving again. I'd like to invite you back and play talk.
Yeah.
But in this case, what is called the Esther Pereira case, it was Madam Justice Claudette Singh,
yes,
who set out quite clearly
yes,
what a caretaker government should be. And in fact, what maybe many of us, myself included, did not realize, she actually set a date by which elections must be held. Without preconditions, an absolute date.
Right,
she also said that the President and his cabinet, as presently constituted, shall perform their respective functions of office. Now, this is different from 106.6, which is the vote of no confidence. Not under or by virtue of the declared unlawful national and regional elections, but under and by virtue of the order of this court.
And the reason we didn't fight over that was because, in any case, the Ordmonson Accord had cut off 2 years from the PPP, and we think so. What the fight we're having today, we could have had it then, but we didn't because the Ordmonson Accord.
No. I think you're wrong with respect, David. I think what we had here was the court was laying down the law, and the government of the day, whether we like it or not. And in those days, we were all opposed to the government.
Yeah.
People tend to forget that about me. We will wrap up.
Yeah.
is that the court
No, and I'm saying yes.
pronounced.
I said the court pronounced. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying we didn't get a fight over it because elections were called a few months afterwards.
Because the government in power said yes, we will obey the decision. David, thank you very much.
But I don't think the government said we'll obey the decision.
Well, they did.
Elections.
They did.
Elections were
Yeah, they
due
did.
under the ordinance of the court.
David, thank you very much.
All right.
Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. See you next week.